Hi everybody. I do apologise first of all, I can't see the chat again, but of course if computers, as the author of Troubleshooting Windows 7 Inside Out, if computers worked perfectly all of the time, I'd be out of a job. So I can't see what you're doing, but feel free to put your questions to me, any questions you want. Obviously it's been quite a big day in tech all round with the death of Steve Jobs at Apple, so I'm sure you're all thinking about his family and about the people that are left behind, as am I. But in this presentation, we'll talk about troubleshooting Windows Update and service pack problems. Now, Windows Update has given all sorts of problems over the last few years. So what I'm going to cover here is, first of all, repairing Windows Update problems in XP, Vista and Windows 7, because it's the same fix for all of the operating systems. A best practice and safe practice for installing Windows service packs, because surprisingly you might be surprised to hear that there are good ways and bad ways to do it, and then diagnosing and repairing problems with service pack installs. So, first of all, who am I? Well, I can get this work here. I'm a Microsoft MVP, Windows expert, the author of Troubleshooting Windows 7 Inside Out, and as has just been announced, the forthcoming Windows 8 step-by-step. I'm co-authoring that, and that will be out next summer. And I'm an editor at Windows 7 News, Windows 8 News, and G-Hacks. And the best way to catch up, if you want to catch up with all the latest news, with webcasts, I'm very fond of having giveaways as well, is on my Facebook page. If you're on Facebook at Mike Halsey MVP, that's all one word, or on Twitter at Mike_Halsey, and you can see those links at the bottom of each slide. So let's start with something that's very important, migrating away from XP. Now, I talk about problems with Windows Update in XP. Well, Windows Update in XP was, as I'm sure you will know, run as a service through a web browser rather than as a dedicated program on the computer. But Windows XP support for Windows Update will end on the 8th of April 2014. That's it. There'll be no more support, there'll be no more service packs, and anyone who's still using Windows XP, if there are other security and malware attacks on it after that time, there will simply be no support. It's just not as stable and secure as Windows 7, regardless of what anybody may say. It doesn't have the same security, and especially if you're in a business where it can take up to 2 years to migrate your systems properly away from one operating system onto another, it's very important to now look at migrating away from Windows XP. So, as I was saying, Windows XP had Windows Update as a service that ran in a web browser. So it pulled the Windows Update, all the Windows Update screens down from the internet, from the Microsoft website. With Vista and Windows 7, it's an application within the operating system itself, which makes it much more robust, makes it much more difficult for errors to occur, but errors do still occur with it. So we'll have a look at how we can rectify some of these errors. So what can cause problems with Windows Update? In my experience, the most common problems associated with Windows Update are third-party hardware drivers. Now, some drivers for your hardware come down through Windows Update and some don't. Microsoft have a system whereby hardware manufacturers can submit their drivers for testing and approval, and once that happens, then they're added to the Windows Update system, and your computer can automatically download and install the very latest updates. However, let me explain the difference between a Windows update and a driver update. A Windows update can be tested at length by Microsoft for stability with that particular version of Windows, whichever version of Windows it's been written for. It can't be tested for stability with third-party software, any software that you may be running. But third-party software being just something that runs on top of Windows, if there's going to be a problem, then it's just going to be the third-party software that will cause a problem. Drivers are different because drivers are required to perform all manner of action, for Windows to actually perform all manner of actions. And these drivers aren't tested thoroughly for how they will behave and interact with each and every version of Windows, which means that occasionally you will get a driver that will be unstable with your particular configuration on your particular machine, your combination of Windows, of updates, and of software. Now, with some drivers, this won't cause a problem at all. If you've got a USB 3 driver and that crashes, then probably the worst that will happen is suddenly your USB 3 ports on your computer won't work. If, on the other hand, you have a problem with a network controller or a display card, then you could find that either your internet connection goes down completely or the computer completely crashes. And hardware drivers are, if you get a system crash directly after a Windows update, then odds are it's going to be a hardware driver. So, but we'll look at how we can fix this. So this is why when you go into Windows Update, if you have Windows Update automatically download drivers, it will just install the critical and the important updates. But there are optional and there are recommended updates as well. And if you look at Windows Update, if you actually run it yourself periodically, then you should always look carefully through the list. And if there are a lot of driver updates, then be aware of what types of drivers they are. It will normally say display driver or something of that ilk. And if you have an instability or if you have a problem afterwards, and it will probably occur straight afterwards, when you restart your computer it probably won't boot and it will blue screen and whatnot, then you know that this is what it is that will have caused the problem and we need to fix it. So, let's begin to look at some of the problems that occur. Now, it's very common for Windows updates to say that updates weren't installed. Now, Windows Update, as you'll see with the screenshot here, will always give you an error code. Now, the error code is extremely useful. All you need to do is type it into a search engine, Google or Bing, whichever is your preference, and information will appear about this. But there is actually a very simple and easy way to fix a lot of Windows problems. So here, as I say, there are many different things that can go wrong with Windows, as there are a great many different components in the whole chain. As I say, you've got Windows updates, you've got software updates, you've got, there's updates for Office and all manner of other things. You've got hardware drivers, and then you've got all the other third-party software that you have on your computer. So here we have a checklist of things you can do to rectify a simple problem. First thing to check is, do you have an active and a stable internet connection? Are you not getting updates, or is Windows not installing updates because your internet connection is choppy? Now, it could be that you're using Windows Update in the early evening. This is probably not the best time because everyone else in your neighbourhood is going to be on the internet as well, checking their email and looking at video and buying things on eBay because it's the most popular time of day. Are you connected to the internet via a 3G or a 4G modem? In which case, I wouldn't recommend using Windows Update at all. It's going to chew up an awful lot of bandwidth. It's going to be expensive more than anything else unless you have a completely unlimited data plan, which is probably not very likely given the way things are at the moment. And that can end up with a very choppy connection as well. And there's also, have you recently installed any other software or any other updates? And if you have, it's possible that Windows will just say, well, I'm very sorry, but I can't install anything else until you restart the computer. And then, after you've restarted the computer, it will be perfectly happy to do so. So if it really can't install any updates, there's actually one quick, simple and easy way to rectify the problem. You've got a folder in your C drive, primarily your C drive, but depending on your computer's configuration, your copy of Windows might be installed on a completely different drive. There's in the Windows subfolder there, you have a folder called Software Distribution. Now, Software Distribution is the repository for everything that comes down through Windows Update. It's where all the downloads are, but it's also where the settings for Windows Update are stored. You can go into this Software Distribution folder, and you can happily delete the entire contents of this folder. Don't delete the folder itself, but you can delete everything that's in it. And what that will do is that completely resets Windows Update to its default. Now, it has a downside, because this means if you've hidden any updates, which you can do by right-clicking on them in Windows Update and selecting Hide in Windows Vista and Windows 7, if you've hidden any updates, then they will all reappear. But it does completely reset Windows Update. And the reason for deleting these files is because on some occasions, the databases that are stored in this folder of the updates that you've had, your computer's current configuration, your software and hardware configuration, and the updates that Windows Update is expecting, sometimes that database can become corrupt. It only needs one tiny little error for everything to fail. So you can delete the contents, as I say, of the Software Distribution folder, and everything will reset, and Windows Update will go back essentially to its factory default setting. And as I say, it's perfectly okay. You can never do any harm to Windows by deleting the contents of this folder at all, but don't delete the folder itself. Even if you do delete the folder itself, it doesn't really matter, because Windows will recreate it, but it's perfectly okay to get rid of the contents of this folder. But what about service packs? Now, the important thing to remember with service packs is that they no longer contain any new features in the way that Windows XP Service Pack 2 did when it essentially was an entire new version of Windows with all manner of new security and other features. Service packs now are just collections of bug fixes, security updates, and other fixes. And hardware driver updates. So there's nothing to get excited about. When Windows 7 Service Pack 1 came out at the end of last year, beginning of this year, a lot of people got very excited about it, and they wanted the beta of it, and they wanted to install it, and then when they did install it, they discovered that it didn't change anything at all on their computers. So everything was exactly the same as it was before. And that's because Microsoft just don't bother putting new features in. They'll always hold these back for the next version of Windows, which will be out on sale probably September next year. So how should you install a service pack? Well, the best way to install a service pack is just to let Windows do it. Just to let Windows Update install the service pack in its own time and update it that way. There are several reasons for this. Firstly, because it's quite common for people to download the full version of the service pack from the Microsoft website, install it, and then say that they're having all manner of problems with it. Their computer won't boot, or other problems have occurred. But also because if your computer's up to date with Windows Update, then odds are you've got almost everything that's in the service pack anyway. So there's no great rush. There's no great need to get that service pack immediately. It's not going to make a huge difference. It's going to add one or two other minor little things, but these aren't things that you need urgently, these are things that will just filter down. Now, allowing Windows Update to install the service packs in Windows is an unfussy way of being able to get the service packs installed, and it's the least problematic way of doing it. I don't recommend that you ever install a beta of a service pack. As I say here, it's just not worth it, because people hype these service packs thinking that they're going to offer all sorts of fantastic new features in the way that Windows XP Service Pack 2 did, and they never do. Now, one thing I want to deal with here is this screen that you get in Windows where it says installing updates, do not power off or turn off your computer, as you can see here on the screen. And you can also see a copy of my book, and there's a good reason for this. And that is because I wrote about service packs for troubleshooting Windows 7 inside out. And I tried my best, I really did try my hardest to break an installation of service pack. I did, all in the name of research, of course. I pulled the power lead out of the back when it was doing this. I turned it off from the power button at the front when it was telling me not to. I tried repeatedly to get Windows to break during this time when it was installing Service Pack 1, and it was saying it's configuring 23%, 24%, do not turn off your computer during this time. And you'll be pleased to hear that despite my best efforts to break this Service Pack install, I just couldn't do it. It just, when I restarted the computer, it just started again, and it just went, okay, well, I need to start from scratch. So it did. So it's actually remarkably difficult to break a Service Pack install. The only time it's ever really going to happen is if there's some kind of incompatibility from the Service Pack you've downloaded, and there's going to be a problem there. So that's the good news. So let's look at ways that we can actually repair a faulty update. Now, this applies to Windows Update, this applies to Service Pack installs as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk you through now the different ways of repairing a faulty update and why each one works in the way that it does, and why I've put them in the way that I have. Now, the repairing a faulty update tip number 1 here is just to use System Restore. Now, this does rather depend on whether or not you can actually get to the Windows desktop. If you can get to the Windows desktop, but something's not quite right, let's say you've rebooted your machine and you get that nice boom and you're getting an error because something is malfunctioning, then you can say, okay, well, I'll just go back and I'll use the System Restore to uninstall this update or uninstall the Service Pack, go back to before it was installed. Then when you come to reinstall that update, let's say you're doing just Windows Update. If you're having a problem, then what you can do is just maybe untick all the drivers and install the drivers one at a time just to see if they cause a problem, restarting your computer every time. It's a bit of a faff, but it's a good diagnosis way of being able to determine which one is actually causing the problem. I had a situation on my own computer with an early USB 3 driver that came down through Windows Update, and whenever this was installed, the machine just crashed completely. It just blue screened on a restart, and it just wasn't happening. So eventually, through this installing updates one at a time, I identified it was that particular update, and I just right-clicked on it and I hid it, and it didn't show after that time. So you can get to System Restore by typing System Restore in the Start menu search box. That's in Windows Vista and in Windows 7. Or if you go into Control Panel and open System in Windows XP and in Vista and Windows 7, you can get to it that way as well. So, we've got another number 1. There you go. I can't count. So, here we go. If Windows can still start after a faulty, or unless we have the same, no, that's the same slide. There we go. Right, there's number 2. So safe mode. Now, safe mode you access by pressing the F8 key on your keyboard after your BIOS screen, but before the starting Windows logo appears. Now, important thing to note here, if you have a new computer that's got one of these new UEFI BIOSes, and you'll know because the BIOS will just really not appear, then they're so quick that it can be very difficult to actually press the F8 key in time. So I would suggest that if you're having trouble and it won't work, that you restart the computer, and pretty much from the moment you turn it on, you just press the F8 key and you keep stabbing that key until you get this menu up. And safe mode will appear. When you're in safe mode, if it will even boot into safe mode, then you can then run system restore and you can roll back the update that went in. So, repairing your faulty update number 3. I want to talk about the computer repair options because these are only in Windows Vista and Windows 7, but they're a wonderful way of being able to fix a problem if Windows itself won't start at all. So you get to these again by pressing the F8 key on your computer's keyboard after the BIOS screen, but before the starting Windows logo appears, and selecting the Repair Your Computer options. And there's all sorts of things you can do here, including System Restore. Now, sometimes this doesn't work because this startup repair is actually kept as files on your hard drive in a separate little partition to Windows itself. But sometimes there's a problem, sometimes it just won't work, sometimes it's become corrupt for some reason. But you can also get to it in 2 other ways. You can either create a system rescue disk, which you can do in the backup options in Windows Vista and Windows 7. Just go into the maintenance folder in the start menu and you'll see backup and restore there. And then in the blue panel on the left-hand side, you'll see create a system rescue disk link. Now that disk will be tied to your computer, but you can use it to start the computer and get into these rescue options if the computer won't start. You can also get to it by booting your computer from your Windows 7 or Windows Vista installation DVD. And when you get to the main install screen, rather than press the big install button in the middle, you'll see down here in the bottom left, there is a link there, Repair Your Computer. And this will take you through to those repair options. Now, these repair options will, by default, try and automatically detect problems. And it'll run through and it'll say, okay, well, we think we've fixed the problem. Do you want to, we'll restart and we'll see what happens. Now, the way this works, and the way it's the same way the automated troubleshooters work in Windows 7, is that they just reset certain components to their default state. And a lot of the time, you'll find that it's not enough, it doesn't work. You are still going to need to use System Restore to roll back to before these updates went in, because if these updates are causing a problem, then this automated repair probably isn't going to work. So rather than say, okay, restart the computer when it says, it's applied fixes, you can press the cancel button and then you'll be presented by this menu here. Now you've got 5 options here. You've got the automated startup repair, which we just talked about. You've got System Restore, which you can see I've highlighted here. And we've got options to run a memory diagnostic, which is a hardware memory diagnostic, to restore your image, restore your copy of Windows from an image backup if you've made one, if disaster really has struck, and you can create one of these in the backup panel as well. I thoroughly recommend it. It's in every version of Windows 7, and it's in the professional and upwards versions of Windows Vista. And it's a complete system image with, perhaps with all your software installed and all your settings intact. And you've also got the control panel there where, if you're technically minded, you can run all sorts of other checks. But For update fixes, then just running a system restore will fix them. So this is how you can repair problems with Windows Update and with service packs in Windows XP, in Windows Vista and in Windows 7. And it gets easier and easier the newer the version of Windows that you have. So it's quite simple and easy to do. This is how you can find out more help on my website and on Facebook and Twitter. And now, if you've got any questions, feel free to fire away.
Alrighty, Mike, we do have a couple questions coming in, and I'm posting them in the Q&A tab. Are you able to see those at all?
Yes, I can.
Perfect.
I can see them there. So, WinSXX is consuming more space than I like. Content of this is associated with updates and should not be monkeyed with. No, the WinSXX folder is going to be is always going to be very big. And let me make sure I actually get the description of this perfect. Yes, what this is it's like a compatibility folder. It provides side-by-side versions of files in order to make sure that your programs will run. When you install a piece of software into Windows, it calls APIs, programming instruction sets, and DLL files, dynamic link libraries, that control all manner of things from the window furniture, the minimize, maximize, and close buttons to all sorts of other standard things within Windows, so the programmers don't actually have to write them. And they control all manner of things, the ribbon, pull-down menus, everything within Windows. And the WinSXS folder maintains compatibility for all the different versions of these that will be required to run all of your software. And the reason it's so large is because there's so much legacy software, older software, that still needs to run and be compatible in Windows 7. So the WinSXX, I'll get this right eventually, SXS folder is always going to be large. It's always going to be at least for, about 7 gigabytes, I think I'm looking at. And there's really nothing you can do with it. You need to leave it. It's important. It's there for a reason. It's quite a critical part of Windows. So, and there's no way that you can reduce the size of it without running the risk that you're going to all of a sudden stop your computer from working or stop a critical piece of software from working. So that has to be left. So sorry, Eric, on that one. Bob, you have 43 folders and 23 meg of $NT uninstall in XP. Should you delete or move off the C drive? It's probably perfectly safe just to delete those. But what I wouldn't do, you know that you can delete something permanently by pressing down the shift key when you press the delete key on your keyboard, and that will delete it permanently and bypass the recycle bin. If you're ever in doubt on something like that, then just press delete normally, delete it, put it all in the recycle bin. 23 megs perfectly big enough to go in the recycle, small enough to go in the recycle bin, and then if it does cause a problem, then you can just open the recycle bin afterwards and you can put it back where it was. But I would say that those folders, these are only temporary folders, and it's quite common for these things to build up, and perfectly okay to delete them. So yes, see if we have any more.
We have another 3 questions. Let's see here. If you want to refresh
looking at them, yeah.
Perfect.
Yep,
Thank you, Mike.
If the software distribution folder is cleaned out, will that remove viruses? Viruses won't sit in the software distribution folder. If you're using Windows XP and you've got a virus, then viruses will commonly in Windows XP sit in System Restore. And this can be a problem because many people advise that in Windows XP you turn off System Restore because viruses are good at hiding there. More recent updates have sort of prevented viruses from sitting there. And of course, one of the things I've been saying right the way through this presentation is use System Restore if you have a problem. And now, of course, you know, I'm saying if you're using Windows XP, you might have to turn System Restore off. It's just another reason why Windows XP is not a suitable operating system to use anymore. But so no, if you have viruses on your computer, they're not going to be in that software distribution folder, so they'll be elsewhere. But I would recommend, if you've got malware on your computer, if you go to malwarebytes.org, bytes.org, and download the free version of Malwarebytes, on my personal recommendation, it clears more malware and viruses than any other tool out there, than any other tool that I have found. But the free version does not run automatically. It's just for you to run manually as and when you need it. So, Chuck, what if the Windows 7 installation disk also blues out? I have a dual boot XP Windows 7. The XP partition works fine. However, the Windows 7 one will no longer boot. I've never seen any example of Windows blue screening from the installation disk, and I'd be absolutely fascinated to see an example if one does exist. If you boot from that Windows 7 installation disk and just run Startup Repair on its own, just run the automatic thing. If Windows won't boot, then that probably will fix it. What you can do, though, if it still doesn't work, is go to reinstall Windows, don't choose the upgrade option, choose the custom option, and just reinstall Windows over the location where you currently have Windows 7 installed at the moment. What it isn't going to do is it isn't going to wipe it because you're not formatting the disk. You haven't chosen the format option. And when you finish reinstalling, you'll see a windows.old folder, and all your files will be in there. Now, sadly, you'll need to change all your settings. You'll need to reinstall all your software. But at least it will keep all your files intact in this windows.old folder. Right, Annie, the last two laptops you bought came with a Windows installation disk. Did not come with a Windows installation disk. Right, what can you do to repair Windows if disaster strikes? Right, this is where this system rescue disk comes in. And this is where this comes in very handy. And I really do recommend that if you haven't got a Windows installation disk with your laptop, which is an issue I'll come to in a minute, then you go into the Start menu, go to Maintenance, go to Backup and Restore, and create a system rescue disk. Probably create two just in case one disk becomes corrupt. It's an increasing problem, and it comes up time and time again that hardware manufacturers are not shipping a Windows disk with new computers and new laptops, despite the fact that you have actually paid for your copy of Windows. You paid for your license. Sometimes they will refuse to give you the disk at all. Sometimes they will charge you $10 to send it to you. When you buy a new computer, I would insist that they give you a copy of the Windows install disk, given the fact that you have actually legally paid for it. And I would probably be very wary of any computer manufacturer that doesn't provide it. But yes, it's an increasing problem, especially from companies like HP, Acer, and Asus are renowned for it, and it's a big problem. So I don't think we've got any more questions at this point.
I'm seeing, let's see, we do have one question that just came in on Twitter, and I'll just read it to you real quick. How can I figure out which program or driver is causing Windows 7 SP1 to constantly fail with an error code that just says it failed?
The it just failed error code. Oh, isn't this wonderful? It's like Windows 8 is introducing a new blue screen of death with a little unhappy smiley face on it, which is just going to now mean Windows has had to restart because it is unhappy. I would roll back to an earlier point using System Restore to before this was happening. And then when you go through Windows Update, I would probably start with the third-party drivers, install them one at a time, restart, check if everything's okay. If everything's okay, install another one at a time, and do it that way. It's laborious, it's slow, it's painful really, but sometimes it really is the only way to rectify a problem in this way.
All right, those are all the questions I see that have come in. Did you have anything further for us, Mike?
Well, don't forget that there's another webcast on the first Thursday in November, which I think will be a very popular one, of troubleshooting network connections in Windows 7. So definitely, sign up for that, and I'm sure a link will be, details will be emailed out.
Perfect. Yes, indeed. We will certainly let folks know about that. If you'd like to register for that webcast, you can visit our O'Reilly.com webcast page. It's there right now ready for you. Folks, we would like to say a big thank you to Mike for his wonderful and informative presentation, and a thank you for sharing all his knowledge and expertise with us today. We thank all of you that attended the webcast, and we thank those of you that sent in your questions, because when we get questions from you, it just adds that much more to the presentation, and we do thank you. Again,
yeah, and anybody who wants to email me as well, or post a question on my Facebook page or Twitter, I always try and answer as many questions as I can, and I have an open mailbox. So